Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
Yeah, I was in tears. I was like, that's the best, man.
What is going on, everyone? I think you know why Willow's here today. Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name's Ryan McGuire, and today we're going to be hitting episode 22. Today is May the 4th, so for all my nerds out there, May the 4th be with you. You want to lay down for a bit? Speaking of nerds and nerding out, we are going to nerd out today. We are going to get really deep into the history of humans and dogs. We're going to be joined by my friend David Ian Howe. He's an ethnocynologist, which means he studies the special relationships that have developed between humans and dogs over thousands of years. So it's going to be a really cool, really interesting topic. Going to learn a lot. But real quick before we jump into the meat and potatoes, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, any of those streaming platforms, just take a second, rate and review the podcast. That helps small podcasts like this grow into bigger communities. It's something you only got to do once, so not asking a lot. But yeah, if you could just follow and rate and review Who the Wild Things Are, that helps us out tremendously. And my rant is over. So with that said, let's get David on here. Hey,
what's going on,
man?
Not much, just chilling right now. You doing okay?
Yeah, everything's good here, dude. I appreciate you hopping on with me. This has been something I've been thinking about for a long time. There was a moment where I was hanging out with Donnie Dust, and he was telling me kind of about this page where there was this guy who was studying about dogs and the relationship between dogs and early humans. And that's how I found out about you, man. So it's been really cool to see your page like kind of develop and all the things that you've been doing.
Nice, man. Yeah, Donnie's a cool dude. Appreciate it. Yeah. I think I followed you for a bit there. I didn't really know much about you until you followed me, I guess. But yeah, trying to think of when. I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, for sure, dude. So for people just hopping on now, maybe tell them just a little bit like about what it is you study and like how you got to kind of specializing in this area.
Yeah. So specifically, I have my master's in anthropology, and I did like an archaeological focus with that. And I studied like hunter-gatherer archaeology and like human behavior and stone tools. So I got really fascinated with that, but I saw a lecture where somebody talked about like this lady buried with a puppy. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And it's about like 10,000 years old. So like one, I didn't realize like dogs were around that long. And then two, I was like, how do you like study that specifically? So I just got really into like reading about it, and there's not much there on it. Like there's like genetic stuff. There's a lot of like if they find a dog buried somewhere, they'll write about it, but there's not much of like a field of that science yet. So yeah.
This word ethnocynology, is that like kind of a newer term that's kind of surfaced in anthropology?
Yeah, so there was an author, he was Canadian. He wrote a book about like Aboriginal First Nations people in Canada and their relations with dogs. And he called it like First Peoples Ethnocynology. But like cynology is the study of dogs, and then ethnos is Greek for people. So it's just the natural combination of the two.
Right. It was Cummins, yeah? The First Nations, First Dogs or something along those lines?
Brian Cummins. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, I always think it's a really cool thing to think about because it seems like there was, this like perfect match where humans and dogs have like all these weird things that are very similar. And I don't really know if it was always like that or we've kind of morphed into similar beings because of all the time spent together, or maybe it's a combination. Do you see it like dogs and humans were made for each other, or this was something that just kind of stumbled upon thousands of years ago, and then ultimately we grew to understand each other to this point?
It's a good question. I think like primates are obviously social creatures. That's like their like adaptation. They're just extremely social mammals. And wolves to an extent are like of the carnivore animals, like in the order Carnivora, are like the most social. And they live in like nuclear families. They have sort of like a pecking order. There's like debates to that. Humans sort of have a pecking order. It just depends on the culture, but same with wolves. And like when we start leaving Africa and there's like all these new animals to hunt and like study, like we would just watch wolves and hyenas do it. And I think just do it, like watching wolves do it enough, we like notice their patterns and that like contact would have happened. So I think it's like an inevitable outcome. And the dog is like the byproduct of that interaction. Like it's like either wolves need to dwindle their population to deal with invasive humans or just get along with them. And that's what a dog is.
Yeah, totally. That's well said. Do you think that the first kind of domestication, or like, I know it didn't just like happen, like all of a sudden we have dogs, but like, do you think that process, like, how do you think that process happened? Because I've heard of different theories, whether it was us like finding a small group of wolves that were a little bit more docile and then kind of taking them while they were young, or did wolves just kind of become more ingrained in our culture by scavenging? What's kind of your opinion on how that all played out?
Yeah, there's multiple hypotheses. The first would be, I think the name, flight distance hypothesis, which is essentially just like there's a number of wolves that had genetics that were like allowed them to like entertain the idea of being near humans more than others. And the ones that could stand to be around them longer got fed, or they didn't get killed, you know? So like over time, that'd be like a natural thing of like dogs just coming closer, and it would make sense there. The other one is symbiotic mutualism, which is the idea that like, kind of like I was saying before, we're both incredibly social animals, and it's just like that sociality is just going to clash at some point. So either we're following wolves to their kills, wolves are following us to our kills, and we're interacting and feeding each other. But just kind of like, you know, throw them a bone, literally. There's another idea that we were trapping them for their furs. Which is neat. And there's like cut marks on wolf bones all over the place. And it's easy to tan. Like you can get a whole industry of processing like bison and reindeer hides. But like rather than do that, if you need to just patch something up, wolf fur is very malleable. And you could just use that too. So I think that's like not the main idea, but like that was probably happening alongside the others. And then the main one would be that we were just picking up wolf pups and raising them. And like, I don't think that was like the first thing someone did. Like they weren't like, hey, let's just, you know, grab these things. But over time, when the wolves started getting more used to humans and stuff, like maybe they would let the puppies around, and that's where, so it's all in tandem.
Right. Yeah. I love the idea of like, you know, my ancestors or some like early man just like picking up a little tiny baby wolf and just like taking it into its camp, and that becoming like how this happened. But I'm sure there's a lot more layers and a lot more other things. My thought process would be that, like you were saying, in some places, you know, when there was tons of wolves, maybe like Europe, Asia, as settlers were moving up, that was probably a food source back then. Like a lot of people don't want to talk about, you know, dogs being a food source, but a lot of people still to this day eat canine, you know, it happens all over. So I'm sure that was also part of their introduction to that species was as a food source.
Yeah. I try not to like post about it just for algorithm purposes, but I would say up until the last 100 years, dogs were like a totally normal food source for every continent on the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people that still eat coyote, like coyote backstrap, not like maybe I would say like coyote prime cuts. Like I know it's kind of gross to think about for a lot of people, but like the more marketable cuts. A lot of people still eat coyote because they have no season. So or at least in a lot of states in America, you can hunt them year round. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that or I guess you probably know the answer to this. I'm just thinking of all my dog questions. Did other early hominid species or like bipedal apes also interact with dogs like in a similar manner, like Neanderthals or like those kinds of species?
Yeah. So there's a really good book called The Invaders, about Neanderthals specifically and wolves and dogs. And her point in the book is that it's probably like humans and wolves teaming up that like led to Neanderthal populations and environments declining, because we could just move in and cover way much more territory with them. But she does have the whole caveat, like ends the book with a caveat of like the genetic and archaeological evidence for dogs doesn't line up with the extinction of Neanderthals, or not like extinction. So it's not like, it's a cool theory, I guess is what she's saying in the book. But in my opinion and in hers, it's not out of the question to think like a Neanderthal or two threw some wolves some meat and like did the same kind of thing. It just wasn't a habitual thing that we see evidence for.
So in other words, to retract there, you're saying that our interactions with canines back then was interactions with wolves, not dogs at that point. Like the genome hadn't transferred over to a dog.
Yeah. So like I always use this example, but like I guess you're a 90s kid as well, maybe like late 80s, I'm not sure. Like we're used to Pokemon, so like you get something like a stone and it evolves like in a second or like the whatever level. Evolution doesn't work like that. So like even with wolves and stuff, it's natural selection or or how do you say, artificial selection if humans are doing it. There's no like wolf and then dog the next day. It's like a gradual process. So genetically, we know dogs, like their genome is in existence about 20,000 years ago. But before then, it could have been like another 30,000 years prior that like process was going on. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see a wolf skull, which is longer, and then a dog skull, which is shorter. But then there's like, in between that, you find them all over, and there's like debates within papers of like, oh, it's a wolf, no, it's a dog, and it like just depends. So to sum that up, I guess I would say like a wolf is just a dog, or a dog is a wolf that is like able to live around humans, and it's just a spectrum, you know.
Yeah, and now like you talk about the skull, like now we have like flat-faced dogs, you know, like we've come full circle where it looks nothing like either of those. So yeah, that even further supports your point.
Yeah, like now you can tell for sure.
Yeah, there's no mistaking like a French bulldog for a wolf, but yeah, for sure. So what about dingoes? I'm curious. So I never knew what kind of dog my dog was. Willow, she's a small like orange dog. I think I figured it out. Maybe you can tell me. There's
got a cool dog.
There's a breed, it's called a Carolina dog, also known as the American dingo. And when I found that today, it looks exactly like my dog, but they're not related to Australian dingoes. So I've heard kind of a couple different things about dingoes and wild dogs. The dingoes in Australia, is it true that they were domesticated first?
Yeah. So dingoes are like one of the coolest topics to me because like Australia had no native carnivores, but the Tasmanian tiger, Tasmanian devil, and like a few other large ones that are now extinct.
Right.
But no canines. And when humans got there, they brought dogs with them. And until like a couple thousand years ago, all dogs would have looked just like your dog. Because I remember seeing that in the picture. I was like, damn, that's like a dingo looking dog. And that's just a generic, like non-gray woolly wolf, what a dog would look like. So those people got to Australia about 50, 60,000 years ago, but they brought dogs with them later on in different waves. So the oldest dingo we know of is 3,000 years old. but genetically it's about 10,000. We know they're in Australia. And when they got there, it's an entire continent without dogs or anything like that. So they just like had a field day and just went out, and like now they're just a wild animal. And it's neat because the Tasmanian tiger or Tasmanian wolf, like, was the alpha of like, or not alpha, but you know, like the top predator that hunted kangaroos and everything. And then as soon as it's out of the way, like the dingo takes over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because like that wasn't that long ago. Like there was Tasmanian tigers, which are like these weird striped, skinny, kind of small tigers that look like dogs. I've gone down this rabbit hole before, like looking at those, and I think there might even be like old film footage. Like weren't they here until like 1900s or no?
Yeah, the last one died like early 1900s, I think. Some people think they're still out there, like Bigfoot, but till I see one, like, you know, bagged and tagged, I don't know, but or alive, hopefully. But yeah, it's neat. And like obviously, when like European settlers got there, they shot all of them to like stop them from eating sheep. But like archaeologically, you can see, or archaeozoologically, you can see like a huge decline in their population already because of dingoes, which is like, to me.
Yeah, that makes sense though. Like if I think about like a pack of 1,000 willows, like out on the Australian plains with just like tons of food around and no bears, no mountain lions, like nothing big to like get in the way. That seems like a great atmosphere.
Yeah, dude, they did a good job, and it's a neat topic now too, because it's like, are dingoes native to Australia then? Are they invasive? Are they bad for the environment, or are they not? And it's like there's two. Yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, we're getting to that point where we can look back far now. Like you can make the same argument about palm trees in most of America. Like none of them are like technically native, but they're like ingrained in our culture. They're a big part of like our ecosystem and what lives here now. So it's like, are they native? No, but like, do we want to get rid of all of them? Like,
That's a good point, man. It blew my mind to find out that there were no native palm trees in California, because like you think palm California. Yeah.
Yeah, it's another weird one. And I know that I've spent a lot of time in Utah and Colorado and most of the West, and some of the forest services, they really try to find what's native, and they will kill a bunch of shit to like restore whatever they consider to be native. My philosophy is like, if it's been here for a couple hundred years, like at that point, I feel like it's already ingrained in the ecosystem. I'm not like zoologically like adept or like, you know, I'm not tied into all of the academia behind it, but my thought is like, if it's been here for a couple of years or a couple hundred years, it's probably pretty well suited for that environment.
Yeah, I'm not as versed in that either, but to my knowledge, like if it's doing well and it's not doing too much harm to anything else, it's probably fine, you know.
Yeah.
I could be dead wrong with that, but I meant to answer your question about your dog. American dingoes, like that's a super neat topic as well, because like before European contact, all the dogs in the Americas looked just like a dingo. Like it was like a small little, like just dingo looking dog. But when like Europeans got here, they brought all their dogs and let them loose too. And like even American dingo and like indigenous like Mexican dogs, like Chihuahuas and I forget the other, it's like a Xolotl, I think is the name of it. It's like a hairless dog. All of that, like they've been so interbred with European dogs that there's no like ancient American dog DNA anymore. They're just gone. Which is a bummer, but like, yeah, before that, all the dogs would have looked just like your dog.
When you think about like reservation dogs, like a lot of people are like, yo, is your dog like a res dog? Because she kind of just has that like plain orange dingo look. Is it possible, did those dogs ever breed with like coyotes, like because they're just kind of free to roam?
Yeah, and that's a fun topic too. Like anything in the wolf genus, so anything in the Canis genus, like dogs, wolves, coyotes, dingoes, are all wolves. Like they're all the same thing, just on a different like spectrum. or a different part of the spectrum, so they can all interbreed with one another. And like there's no like natural black wolves. Black wolves come from domestic dogs, so like that, like there's just so much interbreeding. And then there's like coy dogs and coy wolves, and like a lot of indigenous tribes on the plains had like just wolf hybrids, like when the Spanish got there and wrote about it. So there's just like tons of admixture, and that's really cool to me too, because like canids aren't going anywhere. Like there's just so many. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to ask about, and we just got a question here in the chat from my friend Matt Cameron. It's about the reintroduction of wolves. I'm curious, I know this is a massive can of worms, but where do you stand right now in like terms of like, let's just say Colorado, Washington, like Western states, reintroducing wolves into the natural ecosystem?
I think reintroducing wolves is a really good thing to do for the ecosystem. It is like proven that it does like a great job at like maintaining balance and everything, especially like in Yellowstone. But there's a lot of asterisks to that too, because it's like all human contained borders and things like that. And there are evidence or like instances where wolves like predate like livestock or like people, but they're like few and far between apparently, and often like overblown and exaggerated. So I don't know technically where I stand, because one, I don't live out there, I don't ranch, I'm not a wolf ecologist, but like I think it's a good thing to have them reintroduced, and we live on like their habitat already. So like if you have a bunch of cows running around there and a wolf eats it, like, oh well, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Just to explain to people the Yellowstone thing. So basically there's a great like documentary. It's really short. It's really easy to watch. But essentially they, killed all the wolves there. There was no natural predator for big ungulates like deer. Deer started to eat at the vegetation. Mainly vegetation grows biggest and best around water. So as that vegetation gets pulled out of the river system, the walls start to erode from the rivers. You have falling water levels and you have erosion everywhere. They reintroduced wolves there, brought the deer population back down, and they saw like a big rehabilitation of that habitat. In my mind, I love that story for the pro side of wolves. The part that scares me about that is wolves don't really have a natural predator except for us. And so people hate the idea of killing wolves or keeping wolves in control. So I think that's kind of where my concern comes from. It's like, I'm fine with bringing back, whatever breed ecologists say is the right breed to bring back, as long as we are okay with keeping them in check. And that's kind of, I honestly am like pretty unsophisticated on the topic, but I know it strikes a lot of heartstrings for people when they hear like, what do you mean you're going to kill a wolf? Like, you can't kill, it's magical. I'm like, I agree, but like asterisks.
Right. So. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. It's a topic I'm not versed in enough to have an official scientific opinion, but like I just fucking love wolves. And like this Yellowstone tour guide company invited me out to like backpack in and see them and stuff in early June, so I'm amped. But
hell yeah.
Yeah, but also I've tried to find, because I know people shoot wolves, like find on eBay or some kind of like, I don't know how to get onto like a black market site to find a wolf pelt, but I know it exists somewhere and I want it for a costume, but I don't want it to get like illegally procured. But surely there's one somewhere. I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, you just got to go meet a rancher in Montana, like a real old school dude.
Yeah, he's like, I got 4. Yeah.
I got a freezer full of those things, man. Yeah, we're not in the business of having official scientific stances on this show. It's all about, just bullshitting, acting like we know what we're talking about. So there's no worry.
Cool.
So another really cool thing that I've been talking about with my friends lately is this this like fox domestication experiment that was going on, I think, in like Russia. I think about it a lot with Willow and kind of how it relates to that same story of dogs. I'm sure you've studied all about it because it's pretty legit, it seems like to me. But what's it called again? Is it Siberia?
Siberian fox experiment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Tell everyone a little bit about that and kind of, I guess, like the scientific perspective and goal with that experiment.
Yeah. So Dmitry Belyayev was his name. And he was supposed to breed silver foxes for the Soviet army. So one story went, but I didn't see that in the actual paper. I've heard that before. But essentially, like, he was breeding silver foxes for their furs. And as a geneticist, wanted to check to see, like, he wanted them to be more docile so he could easily farm them better and not be as aggressive. So he bred a bunch to be more docile. Like, he would stick a glove in the cage, and if they like bit at it and stuff, he'd call them aggressive. And like each generation, he would get them more docile, and he would also bred a control one to be more aggressive. And what he noticed was, like, the aggressive ones were bigger, stronger, had like a bigger head. The more docile ones started to wag their tails. They had spotted coats. They like were smaller, and they like enjoyed being around people, or they tolerated people. And in some cases towards the end, like, were domesticated. So like the idea is that he proved that you can domesticate something rather quickly. So the implications of that in a positive way is like, okay, so we probably could have domesticated dogs very quickly if we were doing it with intent. And like, it also shows how other domestic animals like goats and cows and stuff are a little more, like, the more docile they are, like, the smaller they are versus like their wild cousins. But the implications of that are also not good in some ways, because it shows that, like, for one, like the farming foxes and stuff in their cages were like terrible, so that played like a role in like their behavior. And that's like a big asterisk on it. But the other thing too then is, like, in terms of humans, like, what about breeding? Like, and then it gets into all eugenics and stuff like that. Like, oh, so people with bigger heads are more aggressive inherently and stuff like that. So it's just like, that's a whole can of worms that's like interesting to think about with like the fox experiment. But that's why people don't like really replicate it or talk about it too much. It's like, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, yeah, begs the question. That was a good point I never thought of, was if we did it intentionally, because this happened over what, 40 years? I mean,
I believe so. Yeah, it was like in the 30s into the 80s. Yeah.
I always think of this process of dogs being domesticated over thousands and thousands of years, but if there was a community, let's say, one band or one tribe of early humans that was doing this intentionally, they could have had domesticated dogs far before they were widely available, or what we know as dogs.
And like, I would think that, like, in Paleolithic times, dogs are a commodity that you can trade, just like one tribe has obsidian and you're like, well, I want that versus like what I have, and you trade. But you can also trade dogs, because you're like, mine are brown, yours are black, mine are faster, like blah blah blah. You can trade them. But once you get to the Neolithic and like people are settling down in cities, and then you have division of labor with like farmers and writers and like, sheep herders and stuff, you're gonna have kennel masters and dog breeders. And like at that point, it's like you're really exacerbating like that domestication.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point. So as like you move down that timeline, you have people that are really specializing in making a certain kind of dog, probably a dog like yours that's like giant and scary and black and looks like a wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Either for hunting or guarding livestock, or for like, especially like on the plains here in the States, like people use them to carry and pull things before horses and stuff. Yeah.
That's interesting. Do we know so obviously there's like this whole modern dog hunting culture. And when I say modern, I mean the last 200 years. Can we like point to any differences in how dogs were used in hunting 10,000 years ago versus like modern hound dogs, like treeing animals?
What differences would you mean? Like,
Well, obviously the hunting styles are different, right? So that's a lot more like spot and stalk. And I feel like now a lot of dog hunting is about cornering an animal, either so for like mountain lions it's pushing them like maybe into a cave or a hole. If it's bears or coons, it's getting them up a tree. But I don't necessarily see that kind of style of hunting when I think about, ancient hunters. So I'm wondering like if there's a different way they were using those dogs.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So treeing and like sniffing the ground and like flushing things out of burrows, or like, that kind of stuff for a dog, that probably was going on too, like just as easily. And like cornering and treeing, because that's like what dogs are good at. They're bred now specifically for that, and to chase things. But the main thing, dude, I think is just like, if you're with dogs, your prey encounter rate is going to like amplify, because they can sniff things out better. And like, especially with the bow and arrow, or if someone was really good with atlatls, you hit that thing and it's running, like the dogs will go chase it and bring it down for you. Like that's probably the easiest way to do it. And like in terms of like plains people hunting bison, or like in Eurasia people hunting reindeer, surely like dogs chasing the animal led to humans like figuring out a way to like work with that. And like they do wolf stalking behavior, and then humans come in and finish it in some way. But I imagine cornering is probably like the most known way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And
yeah.
another one that's coming to mind is like with bird flushing, like you were talking about, back, anywhere from what happened in America with the Paiutes, or even like way long ago in like Egypt, they would flush birds once they get like under a netted spot. And I know that was something that like the Paiutes did with humans. So they would like hide in the brush and scare the birds so they'd fly into the net. But I feel like Egyptians and Africans were using dogs for that task, which would be way better than any human at that task at scaring birds off the ground.
For sure. And the greyhound and the saluki comes from that area too, where they like bred them for chasing rabbits, and then after that like racing and things like that, which is why they're so slender.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that about Basengis too, that the Egyptians had Basengis that would flush birds and stuff like that.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't. It's weird to think about, because Basengis are like so small and like little dogs. You wouldn't think of them necessarily as like a hunting dog, but apparently they used to do a lot of hunting.
Yeah, interesting.
I went down a big Basenji rabbit hole and I got Willow because a lot of people said that they thought she might be part Basenji. So I started like studying and trying to figure out what that was.
Basenjis are cool dogs, man. I would love one, but yeah, cool looking.
Yeah, for sure. What's kind of your style with your dog? Because like you study dogs all the time. Are you someone that like works really hard on like obedience training? Are you someone that wants your dog to hunt with you? Or are you just kind of more chill, best friends kind of thing?
It's complicated. My dog is this is one of those things where it's like dog training is such a toxic like community on the internet. There's like some people that I really enjoy following. Like I just met one the other day. I think he's a great trainer. But there's other people who just like will shame you for like any way you like some people are like, you can't even tell your dog no. I'm like, what the fuck? Like it's so weird. But anyway, with my dog, it's like he is bred from a line of hunting dogs to hunt elk and moose. So like me wanting him to just be like a suburban like friend dog doesn't pan out well sometimes, because he wants to hunt moose. And like if we're walking down the street and I got him on his like collar, like he wants to like chase a FedEx truck and stuff. I can correct that and like do stuff, but I guess he's very obedient. He's gone through classes. Like I just had another training thing with him the other day. Wonderful dog. It's just like you can't just expect a dog like that to be a perfect house dog. And that's something I learned with this dog, because he's so smart. Like it's wild to me. My dog before this was a lab, and she just did whatever. So it's a lot of responsibility because you have a 100-pound weapon. But also like the relationship I have with him, it's not like I've had with any pet before. It's like another person. He's just so smart. And I would say, I say this to all people too, like having a dog, it's like in my mind, not like in a religious way, but it's like, it connects you with that like ancient world we come from with dogs, you know, like you have a like living, breathing, like domestic wolf in your house at all times, even if you live in like a high-rise apartment in like Tokyo, you know, like it's just such a weird thing to think about.
It really is. If you get really into that rabbit hole, it is all so weird how we got to this point. But I totally feel you on that middle ground between. So I obviously have a dog who's not made for a house either. So I totally feel your pain. He's not a house dog, just not made for it.
Yeah.
But we've worked really hard on like being obedient in certain situations. But I also try not to destroy her instincts, you know?
Sure.
Like there are some times where I want her, like, she likes to kill squirrels. I know it's probably not super popular, but
mine tries.
Yeah. The recent one I wasn't there for. I walked back home and she was super stoked and led me out backside and had just torn the squirrel to pieces and didn't eat it. That's just what they do. A lot of times they just want to hunt and they don't necessarily want to eat it. But usually, like, I try to keep her out of what I would consider dangerous situations. Like, her instincts will get her into spots where she's chasing a mule deer for 2 miles, like, while we're both running through the woods, and she's 2 miles away by the time she realizes I'm not next to her.
Yeah.
Those are the situations where I'm like, we gotta fix this because that could have gone really south. She got whooped by a mule deer and peed on, actually. The mule deer kicked her and peed on her once, when we were living up in the mountains. So there's been situations where it's like she just she gets a little in over her head. Like she'll go after a pack of coyotes if she sees them. She just fearless, but you want to keep them out of those dangerous situations. So
I too have had to chase my dog down, who chased a herd of mule deer across the plains, and like it was at least a mile. Like I had to like take the Jeep and go follow him because I'm not recalling him at that point. He's having the time of his life, but it's stuff like that where I'm like, okay, if he chases a moose and gets like stomped, he's dead. So like I can't like allow, but like I can recall him all I want, like train it all day, and like here in the house, like I'm like Strider, and he'll come right to me. If we're at the park, he'll do it. But if he smells something or he sees something he wants, he does not understand what I want, like, or what I'm saying. It's so weird. And all these trainers are like, just keep practicing. And I'm like, no, it is in him to do that. So,
no, that you have a great point there with that, because everyone's on TikTok. It's like, oh, just work on your recall. I'm like, my dog will come to me all day. Like, it doesn't matter. But like, if there is an elk that runs in front of her, like, she is going to do everything she can to chase that thing.
Yeah. It's like in her genetics. Yeah.
So my biggest fear is her seeing a moose, because we've never I've never been with a moose and her. I've had bear, mule deer, stuff like that, but we've never run into a moose, and that's probably the one that scares me the most with her.
Yeah. Because I know he'll chase one too, and like it's game over if he doesn't come back from that, you know? Yeah, it's tough, man. And like, I train with him all the time. Like I tell him, like, he's got to work for his food. He's got to do all that stuff. Like, he heals. If the doorbell rings, he stays. Like, he's got his jobs. But like, I do feel bad too. Like, when I want him to heal with me and like stay like right next to me, he also, like, dogs see the world through sniffing. So like, I want him to be able to smell all the stuff on the ground, or else he's just not enjoying his life. And it's a hard balance. And I think a lot of people, especially with COVID too, just like got dogs because they were bored. And like, it's, you have an animal in your house, like it's not a pet. Yeah,
that's an interesting one, because I've seen people train their dogs and like pull their heads up as they go down to sniff, like while they're healing, and I'm like, you're not even gonna let the dog sniff the ground? Like, it's just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it's a hard balance, because you want him to listen. but also like you want him to enjoy. So like I'll tell him free, and then like, he can like sniff around, but then he'll have to come back with me. Yeah,
That's the deal. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. I heard actually Donnie, I think, is who told me they ran into, when he had just got Finn, they ran into a moose like up ahead of them on a trailhead. So there's kind of a clearing, and they saw it, and Finn just ran in between them and stopped. Like didn't attack, which I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard, because Willow would just sprint at the moose, like, but I
yeah,
guess Finn just got in between them, like kind of protector mode, and just like stared him down. I was like, that's sick. Like dogs are sick.
that is really cool. Yeah, and they all behave so differently too, but so similarly at the same time.
Right. So
Yeah.
outside of dogs, what kind of stuff are you doing? I know you're doing a lot of artwork I've been seeing on your Instagram. How'd that whole thing come about?
Like my training, I guess, like my master's degree was in experimental archaeology, like with stone tools specifically. So I've been like fidgeting with this for an hour. But I really wanted to know like how to blow like a hand spray, like in a primitive way. And like how that worked. And then that turned into like, okay, well, like I can make this. And I was like, how'd they make cave art? Like, were they taking a little like carved horse in the flickering light and like painting that on the wall, or were they just thinking about it? So I just been trying all those different things, and then it turned into like people DMing me being like, hey, I'd buy that from you. So I was like, oh shit, all right. I just like start pumping them out. That's been fun. I'm making a big video on that. I've been doing some stand-up, like open mics. I've always really enjoyed doing that. And yeah, just working on the bus right now. But main thing I want to really focus at is just getting YouTube like streamlined.
Yeah, it's cool. I've seen you focusing kind of on these primitive arts like flint knapping and the cave drawing. I'm curious, why is it important for you to study the ways of the past? Like, what does that mean? Like, why is it important that we all have this idea of what went on?
Yeah. I guess it's kind of a loaded answer, but I'll try to keep it brief. Like, one, like I have yet to like master making stone tools. I'm still learning, but like it bums me out because it is like a 3 million-year-old thing that like no one knows how to do anymore. And like I just watch it and I'm fascinated by it. And like the more I try it, I'm like, wow, like humans are fucking smart. Like how'd they do this? And it like uses every bit of my brain when I'm trying that. Like I have to like think about it from an angle, and like you gotta use your muscles and the right amount of force. There's that. I think art is like a way for humans to express things that we can't even articulate with like language, you know, like you just like just painting a cave art horse to sell it is one thing, but like when I like make a video, I consider that an art form, and I'm like, that's how I express my thoughts. But to the main answer to that question, I think it is super important for everybody to know basic fire making skills, basic like how to make a flake, at least how to build a shelter, how to get food, how to get water, and above everything else, like learn about the native tribes or like peoples that lived where you were, because when society collapses, like not if, when, it's like the Cherokee here, they knew how to live off the land and like what they ate, how they did it, what they hunted. Like you need to know that because that's the way your environment will help you. Like a lot of people, like if you live in Las Vegas, it's an artificial environment. So like you could try, but that whole population is not gonna be able to sustain itself. Anyway, not to be a downer, but yes, I think it's like important to know all that stuff because it will help you survive.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's like a whole different sect of like modern survival versus ancient survival, and I think my attraction always been magnetized to the ancient survival, right? Like how did they find wild edible plants? And flint knapping, I think I've pretty much decided I'm not in a rush with flint knapping because I've been doing it now for a while, and it's like I still suck. I've made some like really cool stuff, and I've had great days where I knock out like a couple points that I'm like really proud of. But I've also like snapped like so many points like right in front of my face multiple times. So
Right.
I consider it to be a lifelong thing. And then I just remember like, okay, if the Folsom flute and our opinions about the Folsom fluting, which is like this really old stone tool, we estimate that they broke somewhere between 30 and 50% of those stone projectile points that they were trying to make.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what that number was, but these people were making projectile points to hunt animals, and they were breaking them, and they were much better than me. So the whole thing of flint knapping is like, just take your time. It's all going to be good. It's a lifelong learning process, but it's definitely one of those that we gotta make sure that we have some people that carry that on for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And like Donnie told me, well, one, creativity is your best tool, which I always thought was neat. And also, like, if you can make a flake, like, you're good to, like, if it cuts, it's all you need. And like from there on, you can like make more sophisticated tools. But like just knowing how to like strike a platform and take off a flake is all you need to know. And like I always thought that was neat.
Yeah,
which is where
striking a flake and making tools. So a lot of archaeologists and people that studied that era, like most of those tools weren't necessarily only made out of stone, they were made out of reeds and wood. But don't have that evidence anymore because it's organic material that's since, you know, gone back into the dirt. So you can make edges with wood, you can make edges with reeds, you can make edges with bone, seashell, you know, there's tons of different things. It's just like you were saying, being creative and understanding how to make a sharp edge so that if you're in a pinch and you don't have a knife, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. My professor shows, like, in the museum at Wyoming when I was there, like, took us in there and showed us, like, this Inuit, like, clothing and toolkit, like, display, and a Khoisan Bushman display. And, like, the Bushmen obviously have no, like, hide clothing. They just have, like, some stuff made out of plants. Simple little tools like wood and everything like that. And the Arctic toolkit is like massive because they have to have like the parkas, they have like bone harpoons, they have all sorts of stuff, but they don't have any stone. So like you don't see any of that in the record at all afterwards. Some of the bone, but the San Bushmen, like you'll see some of the stone that they use. And since it's a desert, like some of the stuff preserves more, but it's just so interesting how like we think of stone tools as like the caveman, like prehistory thing, but there's infinite amounts of like cultural complexity that probably existed out of just bone or out of wood. And it's so cool to,
bone is definitely one of those things that I really like to experiment, partially because no one wants it and it's super cheap and easy to find. So I'm like, okay, I'll take all the bone. And, you know, working as a big game butcher, it's like you can get hundreds of pounds of bone and nobody wants that. They're just going to give it away to a tiger wolf sanctuary, and I'll take it. And then Willow gets to have whatever I don't want. So she's like hooked on like elk femur and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Cool. So I know you also you got your own podcast. What was the name of it? Life in Ruins? Am I saying that right?
Life in Ruins. Yeah.
Life in Ruins. So that's kind of in your same vein. You're diving in with a couple buddies into archaeology and anthropology.
Yeah. So Carlton is the host of it. I guess we're all hosts, but he started it. And what we wanted to do was like grad students and undergrads too all have like really cool research in archaeology, but you really only get like someone's calling me. Like your research shown or like known to people by publishing it, and that really only happens when you're like a professor and stuff like that. So what we wanted to do, and since grad students are just broke, like notoriously, be able to have them on the show and talk about their research and get like their word out there, because it's hard to do when you're, you know, you don't have a platform like that. So that's what we did, and it's been really fun, like learning about all these different types of archaeology you can do. And like we want listeners to know, like, here's how you get into archaeology, here's what you should know, here's what you should avoid. And it's been really successful, and like our network is like huge now. Like everyone's like, just ask David, or just ask Carlton. And like it's kind of like wild how podcasting kind of just does that. I'm sure like you understand. It's just like you meet so many people.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's a really cool story. And
Yep.
then outside of the podcast, you've got tell everybody the YouTube page, and I really have been digging the TikToks you've been making. I was shocked when I found them because I found myself laughing like the whole time, which isn't very common for like archaeology videos. I was just cracking up.
Yeah, man. Everyone told my whole life like I'm funny, I should do comedy. And then like, but I was in school and I was like, well, I want to be an archaeologist, and I just didn't have time to go do open mics and do that whole like New York comedy grind. Um, but like I found a fun way of like combining that. And a lot of people are like, just tell me like the facts. Like I don't want the humor, but I can only really teach it like just running, like not running my mouth would be the word, but like just stream of consciousness, being neurotic, talking. I just enjoy it. But yeah, TikTok is something I never thought I would like do. But during COVID, I was bored, so I checked it out, and like I just blew up on it with the like the caveman skit videos, and that's been fun. And I put those on Instagram now too. And then I'm gonna do my own podcast here in a minute. I'm just trying to figure out if I want to do them all in person or start doing some just online too. But since I'll be traveling a lot, I'm gonna do that too. So it'll be on like mostly dogs, but then also like I want to interview other people I've met and stuff, like someone like you that wouldn't necessarily be a guest for the other show, you know?
Right on, man. Yeah, that's very cool. And where can people find you at for all those channels? Just give us your handle.
Most everything is at David Ian Howe. I think you can even find Ethnocynology just typing in at David Ian Howe. But my TikTok, my YouTube, and my personal Instagram is all David Ian Howe. And then, yeah, Instagram is Ethnocynology.
Right on, man. I know we're coming up on an hour here, and you gotta go meet your bud. But one last question for you. I've been asking it to everybody I have on the show. That question is, right now, who is inspiring you?
It's a good question. Donnie, I'd say, has been like pretty impactful on my life the past year. Just teaching me stuff, and like texting him some stuff if I have questions. But in the grander scheme of things, I think I watched a documentary on Van Gogh the other day, and I was like, wow, that guy had like an intense life, and like I just really like Van Gogh, and like I was like, damn, like what a cool like way to think about art, I guess. I don't know.
Right on. Yeah, and that's right up your kind of art stream that you're going down. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, it's been great. Well, come here. You say bye. Well, it's been great, and we've enjoyed having you. But it was a great conversation, and I think you are absolutely wild. And yeah, let's do it again sometime, my man.
Yeah, man. Let's keep in touch. Let's hang out at some point too.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, everybody, for joining. That was episode 22 of Who the Wild Things Are. We'll catch you guys next time. Stay wild.
Awesome. Take it easy.